Some recent news came out that the Army apparently has lost quite a few weapons in some past years, so maybe you want to know, how does that work? What happens when a soldier loses a weapon? What's up, my friends? U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos. Today we're talking about this craziness of what happens if you lose a weapon. How do people account for weapons? How does it work if a soldier does lose a weapon? Because in recent news, you may have heard or may not have heard that apparently like the Pentagon, the higher government people did this audit to find out how accountability is working across the military, and it turns out that the Army has lost anywhere up to 1,900 combination of rifles, pistols, grenade launchers between 2010 and 2019. So that's pretty crazy. And so I kind of want to, educate you on how does it work for losing a weapon, accountability in the Army, how is it supposed to work? Because apparently somewhere's in this process, someone slipped through the cracks on that, but I kind of want to talk about that. And if that's the type of content you want to learn about, the Army because you want to join, you're in the Army, you're a veteran, or maybe you're just curious about the Army, make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. Click on that bell so you get alerts as soon as new videos go live, to include the live streams and become a part of that awesome notification platoon. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers before the end of this year. Let's help make it happen. Let's do this. Hit that subscribe. Now, to break this down, we need to start off from the very basics and kind of work our way up to a soldier possibly losing a weapon, okay? So first of all, where do the weapons get stored? So weapons get stored commonly at the unit level inside of what's called an arms room. This is usually like a pretty secure room that has alarms. They usually have like a vault door. There's locks on all the weapons into a weapons cage or weapons rack, and so they're locked in there. So there's quite a few fail safes that kind of go into place. So if someone was to, let's say, break into the building, then they still have to gain access to the room that's got the vault, which would probably be a pretty crazy operation, because usually most of the ones I've seen have like a jail cell door first, or even on the other side, and then there's like a vault door type of thing, or a pretty heavy duty door that's on another layer kind of a thing. So you have to get through those two layers, and then if you do get through those two layers, an alarm is gonna go off and the MPs are gonna be there pretty quick. So it's not an easy thing to just break into, all right? So that's usually where all the weapons are stored at the unit level, because it's accounted for at the company, troop, battery, whatever kind of level, the lower type of level, and there's one individual at each of those levels at the company, troop, or battery that is responsible for the accountability of those weapons. And then when soldiers need to use the weapons to go to the range, to go to some kind of training with weapons, then they go to that individual and sign it out. So they keep track of that. If my weapon is, let's say, number 205, let's say as an example, right? Then they pull out 205, I sign for it saying what time I signed it out, I take it, I now have possession of that, and then he has a log of what weapons are out and which ones are in and who has which weapons. If you're not out in the field, then typically, they're expecting these weapons to come back, that evening kind of a thing. It's not like an individual thing, like you're like, I want to grab my weapon, so I'm just gonna go grab it. No, there's gotta be an actual reason for it. Usually something that's pre-planned kind of a thing. If your platoon, your company, wherever is gonna be going to the ranges, then the armorer is at that same level, at that unit, and knows that there's some ranges coming up. So they expect that people are gonna come to draw weapons at a specific time, and they're usually ready for weapons draw at that time. It's not like a random thing where you're just like, I just want to go grab my weapon so that I can go clean it randomly. No, it's a coordinated thing. So once it's outside of the arms room, now it's in that soldier's responsibility to maintain that weapon. And if they're on the range, out in the field, there's some other kind of things that they'll do to try to maintain accountability of the sensitive items, which is a weapon, maybe some MVGs, or pistol, whatever. So you usually have a sensitive items report, a green 2 report. There's a couple of different kind of terminologies that people use, but this sensitive items report, something that maybe is due at maybe early in the morning and later in the evening, especially for like field problems. So when you're in the field, it starts off usually at like the squad level, then goes up to the platoon level, and then up to like the company or troop or battery to maintain accountability of that. They're gonna ask for that green 2 report, that sensitive items report at a specific time. So that is usually done, let's say, starting off at the squad level. The squad leader is checking all of the soldiers in the squad to make sure they have their sensitive items, the weapons, the MVGs, to make sure they physically see them and physically have them in hand. That squad leader tells the platoon sergeant, hey, first squad's good, right? And that platoon sergeant waits for all the squads to give a good to go on all sensitive items before he sends that report up to that first sergeant. That squad leader tells the platoon sergeant, hey, first squad's good, right? And that platoon sergeant waits for all the squads to give a good to go on all sensitive items before he sends that report up to that first sergeant. That first sergeant is waiting for the same reports from all the platoons before he sends it up to the next higher up level to, make sure that the entire unit has accountability of these weapons. Especially in the field, that's commonly done twice a day, sometimes maybe even 3 times a day. It just kind of really depends on unit policy as far as how often it's done. Even on deployments in a combat zone, this is still done even on deployments. Both times when I was deployed, I think we did one in the morning and one in the evening. So they still had that accountability. You had one that was due, I think, at 6 o'clock in the morning, I think it was maybe. And then you had another one that was due, I think, at 6 o'clock in the evening. Even if there were people out on mission during that time, they would, usually call up through the radios or through the Blue Force tracker, through the tracking system, send a message, hey, the current people you have on mission with you, does everybody have their weapons, NVGs, all that stuff? And then they would send a report back, good. And they would still send that report up. Yes, we have this many people or whatever that are still on base, that are not on mission, these people that are out on mission, but the people that are out on mission, they accounted for those weapons, we're good. Everybody's good on weapons. When you're not deployed and you're done with the ranges, done with the field, those weapons get turned back into the arms room. And before we can go home, the armorer, the person that's in charge of all those weapons, has to give us a thumbs up that they have 100% of those weapons back. So that is across the board with all the platoons, and sometimes even across the board with the whole entire unit too. Sometimes you come back from a major field exercise, you turn all your weapons in, they send up their report saying, yes, I have 100% of weapons back. We can't go home though still until Alpha Company, Bravo Company, Charlie Company, all of them have 100% of their weapons too. And then once we get the green, the thumbs up, that all the weapons are in, all the NVGs are in, then we can finally go home. Same goes for when you come back from a deployment. You usually come back in like spurts and kind of different groups when you come back from a deployment, but you come back with that group, they turn in the weapons, we got 100% accountability, cool, you get to go home now. So that is how accountability is supposed to work. Obviously, there are times that apparently things have slipped through the cracks, otherwise we wouldn't be in this situation where apparently 1,900 different weapons have turned up missing that are unaccounted for. But let's talk about what happens when that rifle, that pistol, those NVGs do turn up missing. So typically the soldier should let somebody know, hey, I don't know where my M4 is at. I don't know where my NVGs are at. Something like along those lines, telling the squad leader, telling the platoon sergeant. Well, they're gonna start looking for them, all right? And they're probably gonna be on lockdown. Everything's gonna go on lockdown, especially you're in the field. You have no idea where it's at. Everybody's gonna go on lockdown. Everybody's gonna start looking for this weapon, looking for these NVGs. Especially if it's a thing where like you came out of the field and then realized that you're missing that weapon or the NVGs, then they're gonna go on lockdown. Nobody's gonna get to go home. They're probably gonna have people looking all around the area, looking out in the field site to look for it. Everybody's gonna be looking all over the place. Sometimes they even lock down the base. So sometimes it does depend. Sometimes it's just simply the unit level where they will lock it down at the unit level, but I've also seen it before too where the base is on lockdown. So they're on lockdown on the base and nobody's allowed to leave the base. I think people can still come into the base, which kind of traps yourself, but nobody can leave the base until they figure out what's going on and then make a judgment call because they can't necessarily keep everybody there forever, especially since not everybody on that military base is military. So they're kind of, it gets a little bit shady in that area. That one's not as common. It kind of depends on certain factors for that, but more commonly it's at the unit level where they'll lock everybody down at the unit level and be like, okay, nobody goes home until we find this weapon. I have never had a situation that has gone more than a few hours of looking for the weapon before they finally found it. I have heard horror stories of people where this has lasted several days and they've been stuck like sleeping and eating MREs inside of their little work area until someone found this weapon finally 2 days later or whatever. But I've never experienced one that long. Mine was always like maybe like a couple hours, maybe 30 minutes, something along those lines. Let's say in the instance, they don't find it. What happens then? Well, an investigation has to kind of go down. I don't know at what point they kind of give up the search type of thing and then the investigation kind of goes down as far as who is negligent and what happened as far as how this item was lost, but an investigation at some point in time has to take place. Will that soldier have to pay for a weapon? No, not usually. I don't think I've ever seen a situation where like a soldier lost a weapon, lost a pair of NVGs, they had to pay for it. I've never actually seen anybody actually like lose it and they didn't find it kind of a thing. I've never been in that situation, but I have been in a situation where I've seen soldiers lost a weapon and they found it, or lost NVGs and they found it and then they were damaged. Some examples were like, someone lost a weapon because it fell off their truck. They found it down the road and it's messed up because it fell off of a truck and got ran over or something. NVGs, same kind of thing. Maybe it fell out of the truck, got ran over, and they found them, but they're all busted up. So if they found that, it was just an accident, then usually they just kind of write it off and, it kind of gets written off and then they get replaced somewhere down the road. Soldier doesn't necessarily get in trouble, maybe gets, counseled on it and on making sure to be more responsible for it possibly, but typically the soldier doesn't get punished unless it was found that the soldier, was negligent, was not keeping track of their, equipment properly, and that led to the loss and then the damage or just simply the loss. So they don't make the soldier pay for it, but they could essentially get an Article 15, which if you're not familiar with Article 15, it's like their punishment to maybe reduce them in rank, reduce them in pay, maybe restrict them to the barracks, whatever the case is. So that could happen. The situations I've always seen, it wasn't because of negligence, so they lost it and they got damaged. It was just a mistake, so they kind of got like a counseling, a verbal talking to, but not an Article 15 for it. But that could come down. Article 15, reduced in rank because you were negligent with that weapon that resulted in the loss of it or the damage of it, and so now you were a specialist, now you're a private. Just to kind of briefly touch on the topic, because I've heard of scams working this way too, where people will say they're talking to someone online and this person can't leave the deployment because they lost a weapon and now they got to pay for it and they need you to send them money so they can pay for this weapon. No, that's not what's going to happen. It's going to be still along the same kind of lines. An investigation is going to go on, and if it's found that negligence caused them to lose that weapon, then they're possibly going to get reduced in rank, but they're not going to hold them hostage in that country until they pay for that weapon. If they really wanted to charge a soldier for the weapon, they're just going to directly take it out of their pay. They're not going to I want your debit card, I want a check, I want something, some cash, go to the ATM and give me this money. No, they're just going to directly take it out of your Army pay. If they really wanted you to pay for it, they're going to take it directly out of your Army pay. And if you don't make enough, well then I guess you're not getting a paycheck for a couple of months or whatever the case is. You're getting a really small paycheck for several months. So it's not a situation where they're ever holding anybody hostage until you get this money. Now, related to that, you may be kind of curious. Well, what happens if I'm in a combat situation? We're in a firefight, my vehicle gets blown up, I didn't have enough time to grab my weapon because it was in the center console or whatever, right? You're in a combat situation, your weapon got damaged, got lost because you got shot and you lost your weapon after you got hit by a blast. Well, what happens then? In those types of situations, here's how it's supposed to work. It should be written off as a combat loss. That goes the same for equipment, vehicles, anything like that. If you're in a combat situation and that piece of equipment, whether it be a weapon or vehicle, your Army gear is lost, destroyed in a combat situation, the unit has ways to write that off as a combat loss. We've lost this due to combat, and so it just gets written off. Now I say that's how it's supposed to work. I've only heard of one story. Someone was telling me about it actually recently, how they had a buddy that had a 9mm. They were trying to save another soldier, and in the process of trying to save that other soldier, their 9mm fell and they couldn't go back for it because there's a crazy firefight going on, and that person got in trouble for losing that weapon. I mean, technically that should fall in the category of a combat loss, but sometimes you just have crappy leadership or whatever the case was where that wasn't deemed a combat loss and that soldier got in trouble for losing that 9mm. But technically in those kind of situations, it should be written off as a combat loss. Now I already know some people are in the back of their minds like, man, I can maybe get an M4 then if I say that it was a combat situation and I just hide it. No, there's gonna be a whole investigation going down into it, and those things are tracked serial number wise, and if somehow someone found you later with this M4 that magically has the same serial number or is missing its serial number, whatever, you're gonna get busted for it. So could you possibly get away with something like that? I'm sure maybe it's even happened before or whatever, but I definitely think that's a bad move and would be pretty stupid of a thing to do. So don't be sitting here trying to figure out how can I figure out a way to keep this military equipment, but say that something happened to it as loss of accountability. Just freaking go buy an M4. You can go buy an M4, not necessarily an M4, but an AR-15. You can go buy a dang AR-15. You don't need the Army's version of that just so you can get burst. I think there's ways that you can get actual legally, I think an AR-15 with burst functions if you go through a different process, or maybe depending on your state or something. But nonetheless, okay, you can probably just get an AR-15. It's just as good as an M4. Even though I was a truck driver in the United States Army, there was actually a time that I went on a raid. I guess it counts as being on a raid, but if you want to kind of make your own judgment and hear the story, check out this video right here. If you haven't seen my latest video upload, I got it right there. Links, as always, are down in the description box for social media, for the Discord, for all sorts of links. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Christopher Chaos. I'll see you next time. See ya.